Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome back for my latest entry. For those who are new, welcome. I make these little videos about films I enjoy and want to share. Typically, it's a lot of horror, but I do work in a lot of other titles as well from time to time, especially stuff from the 80s that I might have forgotten. If you enjoy what you see, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing and hitting that little bell icon to get notifications for when I put up new content, which is usually once or twice a week, though occasionally I fill in a third. Okay. Now that all that's out of the way, it's been a very rough week. I've been sick most of the time, and I wanted to get this video up much earlier, but it's better late than never. Anyways, we had a really great release last week on Shudder. It was the final installment for the documentary series In Search of Darkness, the synopsis for which is an exploration of 80s horror movies through the perspective of actors, directors, producers, and special effects craftspeople who made them, and their impact on contemporary cinema. Though last week we got our final installment, In Search of Darkness 3, and here's my thoughts about the series as a whole. So, it was great. All three of them really were. They go into such deep detail. It's simply amazing that they were even able to organize all of this, much less put it together in such an easily accessible and digestible format. Well, at least, easy to get wrapped up in, because it's really not easy to finish in a timely manner, because these are some long entries. Part 1 is 4 hours and 24 minutes, Part 2 is 4 hours and 23 minutes, and this latest one, the final installment, Part 3, is 5 hours and 41 minutes. So in total, it's roughly 14 hours and 28 minutes. So they cover such a mix of titles in this, from extremely popular films, which everybody either saw or at least knew of, whether they remembered, like the buzz around the time that they came out, or if they came across that VHS box when they were renting other things back in the day, to some very obscure titles that, speaking for myself, I'd either forgotten about entirely or had no idea of their existence in the first place. For those who grew up in the 80s, or for those who were very active, doing VHS rentals and everything back then, this is definitely a walk down memory lane, a nostalgic trip through, this decades-old ritual of, finding the strangest, scariest, grossest films that they could get their hands on, whether in a video store or late night on cable. Because sure, there's, many of these films had theatrical runs, but not in all cities, meaning that, many had no choice but to only enjoy these via rental or cable, so that was their main access to them. So these entries definitely cover the entries that they cover definitely bring back all of those memories. Though we have these fancy algorithms now, which can do their best, to try to curate a selection for us based on what we've enjoyed before, it wasn't always like that. You used to depend on a video store stocking up on something strange if, that you could just kind of take the risk. And sometimes you would get something that really wasn't that great, but sometimes you would find some really great gems kind of hidden in that horror section. So most of this kind of fell by the wayside as major video rental companies kind of pushed smaller, locations out of business, which I'm looking at you, Blockbuster, but oh yeah, you're not around anymore. Even your show on Netflix got canceled. Anyways, so, over time it became more and more difficult to find titles from that time frame. It feels like we had like this 10 to 20 year gap of only the most popular films from that era being available and easy to find, causing us to forget those gems that were around. And, even not necessarily gems, but just some of those really strange ones. But so for the nostalgic ones, this is a great way to kind of re-enter that world. Both the hits and, not necessarily bad ones, but just those very odd ones that had like very specific tastes. Now, for other horror fans who were always interested in what that decade kind of had to offer, this is a great one to check out to get more info on, more info than just the Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Leatherface kind of titles, but some of those other ones that were available back then, those single entry hits. But, more than simply getting that best of the best, or the most popular of the time, those titles that have lived on and, have had easily accessible means by which to enjoy them, on a service such as Shudder or Netflix building up their catalog and so on. And, especially a lot of these Blu-ray remasters as well. There are titles that you may have never come across while, looking for something else from that time frame to enjoy, since you no longer have access to that brick and mortar store or a shop you could walk into and just stumble across something very strange. Because that algorithm, as advanced as it is, it doesn't really seem to allow for stumbling across. It's just going to hone in a little bit too much and not really give you that risk of finding something different. And I feel like These days, if you want to explore films from a certain time frame, it can be difficult to know where to start. I experienced this myself when exploring Hammer films on my channel for the first time in early 2022 onward. I came across some titles I enjoyed from that time frame, and some, really not so much. But anyways, this documentary hit so many notes from that time frame. Even on titles that I didn't particularly enjoy back in the day, I get this level of focus and detail that makes me see the film in a new light and pushes me to give those titles another chance, or in the cases of the ones that I did like, it kind of pushes me to finally revisit them after so many decades have passed. Also in this documentary, we get this, I get this nostalgic kick as they move from time frame to time frame, title to title. And then I kind of kick myself for not taking notes. Though I did this weekend check out, Waxwork 1 and 2 and Ghoulies for the first time in well over a decade. But aside from what they zero in on, when they kind of zero in on a title, so to speak, we get these interesting transitions that show several other titles from that same time frame before zooming into the one that they're about to dive into that detail for. So during those times of the documentary, I kind of get these reminders of these other titles that were available at the same time that we would have naturally come across in the 80s if we were looking for something to rent at our local mom and pop video store. So while I enjoy a lot of new horror, there are times that I get in that nostalgic mood, and I want something from my youth, because sure, there are times that I revisit something and it just didn't hold up well, or I revisit something like an entire franchise for my channel, and I may see that how I ranked some of those entries had changed over time, but it's always worth that revisit. This documentary, though, while highly enjoyable in and of itself, it kind of works as a guide for what to revisit, a reminder of some of those titles that one may have forgotten, and the detail that they dive into with these interviews with the filmmakers really makes this so when one does revisit that title, they may actually find a higher appreciation for it than they did before, seeing it in that different light. Hearing speak of what their goal was with their project for those filmmakers, what that production was like, and what the reception was like at the time. And knowing that this whole series, this whole documentary series had kind of started from what I understand, as a community-backed project to get things off the ground, gives it a feel of being much more personal, especially when you see in the ending credits where they have videos of some of the backers. Because honestly, if some mega company was involved, to the point of having ultimate power over kind of what they're going to do with the project, I would have expected the entries to be a lot shorter, not as much detailed, and nowhere near approaching that, the various kinds of films that we got either reminders about or to know about for the first time. One more final note on it is, the way that they kind of balance their focus on something popular to something not as popular. Those titles like Blood Beach or Extra, both of which I'd never gotten to see, but I vividly remember seeing those VHS covers. That balance really works out great. Now, of course, with this runtime, I wouldn't recommend trying to binge these. I actually wouldn't even recommend trying to watch any single entry in one sitting. Break it up, take your time, check it out gradually, really take everything in as you check it out. Speaking of checking out, thanks for checking out this latest entry of mine. In Search of Darkness is currently available on Shudder, all three parts of it. And I'll put some links in the description for some additional detail, such as their website and everything. And anyways, thanks for stopping by and sticking around to the end. And thanks for all of you who have subscribed, over the time frame that I've had this channel up. Just this past week, and I've crossed the 200 subscriber mark. And it really helps out, a lot. And anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Now, where can I get In Search of Tomorrow?